The series begins in a small alley with a woman named Alam standing on the balcony of her house, and she yells at the man who sells, but the man yells at her and yells with her, so Alam gets angry and threatens him if he doesn't leave. She will wake up her husband if he doesn't leave, but the man who sells doesn't leave and gets angry at her way of talking and decides to go inside in order to fight with them. And at that time a dream husband is sleeping in the room, and his name is Karakuri, and he is surprised by a strange man who enters the room and wakes him up and fights with him, and Karakuri is surprised, but he could not respond, and it appears that this person is a coward and does not like problems. Alam gets angry with her husband, so she refuses to take their son, Zero, to school that day, and forces her husband, Karakuri, to drive their son by his taxi, although he refuses, but because of his weak personality, he refuses to discuss with his wife, and takes his son, Zizzo. He takes him to the school, and there he sees Zizzo, a girl with him at school, and he flirts with her with the same words his father used to flirt with his neighbor, so Karakuri gets nervous and apologizes to me, the girl's mother, and after school, he keeps saying, "No, son, please don't say anything to your birth about the lady you flirted with." The child laughs at his father, forcing him to eat beans in exchange for not speaking. And because Zizzo is allergic to beans, he fears for his Karakuri, but he is forced to agree and assures him to eat a small amount of it, so that he doesn't get tired, but he is surprised that the boy's body showed allergy symptoms, so he quickly goes to the doctor, and his wife Alam arrives, who is afraid for her son, and Karakuri refuses to tell the truth, so he lies and says that the principal of the school called him on the phone and told him, "Come, your son is tired." Alam goes to grill water, so Karakuri takes advantage of the opportunity and tells the doctor the truth so quickly, the doctor gives the child an injection, and the matter is resolved. At the same time, and in another place, we see a young man named Beno, and he is sitting on the sea in a hotel, and he will be staying there permanently and for free, because his father is the owner of this hotel. The bet is for its owner, and the loser wishes that he pays for his friend's accommodation inside the hotel for a whole day, and the employee takes the visa from Beno, but the surprise is that the visa is refused, so he gets angry with Mino, because he does not know the reason, and at the same time a call comes to him on his phone from his brother Kareem, that their father, who helped me, died, so he is shocked, so he prepares to travel to their house and takes his friend with him, and refuses to take his suitcase, and says that he will only stay here for one day, then he returns to the hotel and takes Beno to my villa, where he delivers Ali, his brother Kareem, his wife Rhonda, and his sister Shireen, who is married, but her husband is outside the country, and then Beno goes to see his father before the burial, but his brother Kareem shocks him that his father died 2 weeks ago, and that they tried to communicate with him, but he did not respond, and his brother blames him for his recklessness, and we know that Beno has not come to me for more than a year. His house, and he did not see his father, and he asks them about the cause of his death, so he discovers that his father had diabetes, but Beno did not know, and Beno gets angry with himself, and then he greets the worker, Ashrak, and he has been working in this house since their childhood, and he is the one who raised them, and it appears that he is mute and speaks to them in sign language, and after that the lawyer arrives and his name will be Al-Hami, and the 3 children gather to open the will, but the surprise is that he asks the worker Ashrak to come, and the lawyer says that this is their father's request, "Help me before his death," and the lawyer speaks and says that their father's wealth is summed up in real estate in £135 million, and all the children will be excited and want to know what their father left them, and he will leave Kareem £120 million and the company. The money has run out and Beno has nothing left, so Beno gets angry, but the lawyer tells him that his father left him a big mansion that he inherited from his family. They know the secret of that palace, and Beno is surprised that Kareem has packed his clothes in a bag, and Beno feels embarrassed, and decides to go to the hotel, but his sister shocks him and tells him that she will close the hotel since she owns it until her husband returns, so Beno is forced to take his bag and go to the palace that he inherited from his father, and as soon as he arrives at the palace he is amazed by the beauty of the palace and is surprised that it is still clean and the lights are on, even though no one has entered it for a long time and there are no cleaning workers, so he guesses that someone comes to clean it every once in a while, and he keeps watching the beauty of the palace and he is impressed. We notice and Beno climbs the stairs that the head of the deer that was present within the decoration is moving, but he did not notice, and he walks admiring the shape of the door of a room and decides to sleep in it, but he gets annoyed when it does not open, and he searches for another room to sleep in until he settles on a room and enters it, and after that a person's imagination appears as if he is moving behind him but he did not see him, and Beno sleeps to rest, and at night Karakuri is working on the taxi, and an old lady stops him and asks him to drive her to the palace of Tab Shahzad, and Karakuri guesses that it is a new palace, so he did not know it, but the lady tells him that it is an old palace since the 30s, and she will describe the way to him. At that time Bennu wakes up to the sound of a banging, and we open the window, and Bennu cries in fear, and he closes the window quickly and searches for the source of the sound, and at the same time he brings Karkiri, the lady who is with him, to the palace, and as soon as she pays him his money, he looks at his side that she has disappeared, so he guesses that she has entered the palace, and then he looks at the money and it looks strange, so he thinks that it is you joke with him and give him money in the fortune bank game, so he gets out of the taxi and leaves him and enters the palace so that the lady can change the money for him. He finds the door of the palace open, so he enters easily and keeps calling for the lady until he meets me. No one asks him how he got here, so Karakuri tells him what happened to him, and because Beino is sure that there is no one in the palace but him, he guesses that Karakuri is just a thief, and he says that to correct his position at the same time, so Karakuri guesses that Beino is a fraud because the lady entered the palace a little while ago until he hints Karakuri is a picture of a woman attached to the palace, and she will be the same lady who rode in the taxi with him. The two keep looking at the picture until the color of the painting's lady's clothes changes from white to purple. The two get scared and go outside the palace. Beino decides to take his car and run away. As for Karakuri, he discovers that his taxi has been stolen, so he quickly goes to work. A reporter in the police station, and on his way to the house, he meets his neighbor Assam, so he tells Karakuri what happened, so Assam guesses that this is a fraud and he did that to steal the taxi, and they decide that they will go to the palace tomorrow to retrieve the taxi, and at the same time he goes to his friend's house to stay in his house, and tells what happened and says that even he does not know who is the lady in the picture or who is the man in the other picture, so his friend guesses that this Karakuri is a swindler and wants to rob the palace, so Beino gets nervous about his friend's words and decides to go to the palace the next day. Morning, Beino goes to his brother Karim, and he refuses to tell him what happened, and he decides to know the story of the palace from him indirectly. They are talking that Karim's wife, Rhonda, and their son, Saif, are calling, and it appears that their son, Saif, loves their uncle Beino very much. Alam wakes up with her husband, Karakuri, and asks him to take her, her mother, and her sister, by taxi. It turns out that Alam is lying to her family, saying that they are not poor, and she also wants to tell them that the taxi is rented for the purpose of hiking only. Because Karakuri is afraid that Alam will tell her that the taxi has disappeared, he tells her that the taxi will be fixed and he cannot deliver it at the same time. Beino is on his way to the palace, and they get a call from the hotel employee, and he tells him that his friends are still sitting in the hotel and they do not want to pay for their seating inside the hotel, and Beino is fighting with one of them. One of his friends, and he tells him, embarrassed, that he does not have any money, and then he reaches the palace, and it appears that Karakuri is standing waiting, and calls his neighbor Assam, and Assam convinces him that an officer agrees to search the palace, and explains to him that he inherited this palace tomorrow, and he did not know anything about him, but Assam did not believe him, and he intends to search the palace because if he found drugs or something illegal, they would hand him over to the police for interrogation, and he would say that he would go in to search the palace alone and leave Karakuri standing with Beino outside, and many hours would pass while he was inside, to the point that they sleep from exhaustion and wake up in the middle of the night, and they are surprised that Assam has been inside the palace all this time. They are afraid to enter the palace. However, they encourage each other and decide to enter the palace together. They call on Assam, but he does not appear. They are still on the first floor as if they haven't moved from the place, so the two discover that something is wrong, so they hold each other's hands and go up to the stairs, but the surprise is that they are still on the first floor, so Beino decides to turn the flower vase over to see whether they will return to the same floor or not, and they go up for the last time and discover that the vase is upside down as they left it, so the palace wants them to return to the same place, so they hold each other's hands and leave the palace. They are surprised and amazed when they meet a man of their mother wearing a robe who is in the palace garden and says that his name is Ogdin and he is the guard of the palace. Asking him about the story of the palace, Ogdin says that this palace has been closed since the death of grandfather Bahar and grandma Esad, and they are the owners of the pictures inside the palace. He also says that his father he made a deposit in the bank so that he could take his salary from him every month, and they would stay with him in his room because they were afraid to go back to the palace. Abedan said that he had heard many myths about the palace, but he did not see anything indicating that there were ghosts in it. His friend Assam, who disappeared and has no trace of him at that time, and Beino is thinking of selling the palace, and in order to force Karakuri to help him and at the same time compensate him for the loss of the taxi by offering him to get a buyer, and in return he takes 1% of the karakuri, and the price of the palace will be 100 million pounds, meaning that karakuri will take 1 million pounds, so karakuri is impressed with the amount, and he agrees immediately, so karakuri seizes the opportunity and raises the percentage to 3%, and because Beno wants to get rid of the palace, he agrees. For the first time, the two cooperated in order to get rid of the problem, and then Karakuri goes to his house, and as soon as he arrives, he learns from dreams that Assam's wife is angry with him and has been looking for him for a while. As for Beno, he decides to sleep in Abadan's room until the palace is sold, and he wakes up in the morning and wonders how Abadan sleeps on a bed full of dust. He only breaks his fast, and then asks Abadan to enter the palace with him to change his clothes, so Abadan remains standing in front of the room outside until Beno finishes, and then Beno goes to his father's lawyer and asks him for papers that prove his ownership of the palace so that he can sell it as soon as possible. At that time, Rhonda searches for her son and remains she calls him until she finds him in his father's office room. By chance, she finds a birth certificate in the name of Samir Bahar el-Shazli, so she is surprised that Karim has an uncle called Samir, and he did not tell her about him. Then he shouts at his son and asks him not to enter the office room again, and Saif is a very sensitive child, so he gets upset to the point of fatigue, and the doctor comes to check on Saif and reassures him that he is fine, but his wife becomes angry and makes sure that something Karim is hiding from her. At the same time, Karakuri and Beno arrive at the palace to search for him. Assam again, but a picture falls in front of them, and someone dropped it from the balcony, and it turns out that this picture consists of 4 people, and the father is Bahar, the mother is Esad, and the first child is my helper, Beno's father, but they do not know who the second child is in the picture, and they ask Abdan, but he does not know, and Beno goes to the villa to check on Saif and asks his brother Karim about the second child in the picture, but Karim says that any child could be Baba's friend at the summer resort, so Beno goes, but he is not convinced, and Karakuri, Abadan, and Beno are sitting in front of the palace, waiting for the person who will buy the palace. They could not open the door again, but in a comical way, he tries to take the jacket from Garib and tells him that the temperature is high, and during their ascent on the stairs, the head of the gazelle begins to fall points of blood on the buyer, Garib. Karakuri laughs and tells him that we are joking with you. The palace rooms, and he admires all the palace until the door of the room is closed on them. When a stranger tries to open the door of the room, he gets injured in his hand, and the 3 remain afraid, and they cannot go out in the same breath. At the same time, Ola sees in the bathroom mirror the same lady who appeared to me who rode with the taxi, so she screams and goes to open the room for them, and the 2 refuse to buy the palace after what happened to them, and during their exit from the palace, all the vases fly in the palace, so they fear the 4 people and they quickly lie down outside, and Ola and Garib get into their car and leave. As for Benu Karakuri, they go inside the palace again, and suddenly Assam appears and comes out of the office room inside the palace, and it looks the same as it was a few days before his disappearance, but the strange thing is that he did not feel the length of his absence, and he behaves as if he left them a little while ago, and Assam says that he searched well and did not find anything and remains. The 2 are terrified and decide to leave the palace, and Karakuri returns to his house, but his dreams were waiting for him, and she suspects him that he is cheating on her because of his many disappearances, so she asks him for a divorce, and Alam goes to her parents. Watching the palace and Beno enters with her, he is nervous, and she tells him that she found a birth certificate in the name of Samir Bahar el-Shazli, and she also says that she heard him telling Karim about the photo, and we are sure Rhonda the second child is Samir, and he did not die when he was young, as Karim said, and if he was saying this while he was tense, and it was clear to him that he was lying, then he told her about what was happening in the palace, so the 2 concluded that this palace was really haunted, or that someone was a thief doing all this to take the palace from him. At that time, Shireen's husband returns from outside the country, and he is happy that his wife is the heirs of a large hotel, and it appears that he wants to manage the hotel. It appears that he is a greedy person and loves money so much that in a short time he hired engineers to make renovations in the hotel without his wife's knowledge, and Beno goes to Karakuri, and once he finds out that Alam has gone to her parents, he proposes that he come and live with him in the palace, and tells him that his companions have abandoned him, and he is the only person he trusts. So Karakuri agrees. The palace, but he does not say anything, and they arrive at the palace, and Karakuri notices that all the clocks are stopped at 3 o'clock, so Karakuri fixes them, and chooses a room from those in the palace and goes to sleep in it, and they both wake up to the sound of a child crying, and they keep looking for the source of the sound, and they are afraid until he is discovered. The palace has a storage room, which is a small and old room, and suddenly they see the silhouettes of people running around and they get scared and lie outside, so they go to Abaddon and ask him if he saw someone here, so he reassures them that there is nothing, so he returns to the palace again, and suddenly a corpse of a person hanged with a rope appears in the middle of the palace, and after that he disappears, and because of the difficulty of the situation, Karakuri loses consciousness, and after he wakes up, he tells what happened to Abdin, but Abdin does not believe them and guesses that it is just a preparation, so they take him to the storage room in the palace and ask him about it, so he tells them that it was the room of the palace maid. The farm owned by Bino's father. The next morning, a person arrives at the palace and tells them that this suit was given to him by Bahar to iron it. This person sees the pictures on the wall and looks at the related photo of the person. He confirms that this person was the one who gave him the suit 2 days ago, but he was younger, and Bino Karakuri is surprised. What happened? And they look at the suit while they are afraid and ask each other what happened, because a man and his lady died more than 40 years. They appear now and decide to take the suit and put it in the room, but they find a divorce paper with the name Samir al-Shazli and Fatia, and they are surprised how Samir, Bino's uncle, got married to Fatia, the worker. They decide to search the house, and after a lot of research, they find the contract for selling the palace from Bahar to Samir, so they decide to go to the lawyer to take the palace papers to find out other things about the palace. He did not leave him, and at the same time Shireen was surprised that her husband intends to ask for a loan from the bank with the guarantee of the hotel that she inherited, because he needs renovation work for the hotel and he needs a lot of money. And he advises her to keep her money, so he reassures him that her husband knows that she inherited a hotel only, but the 14 million is not known about anything, and then he tells her that the lawyer contacted him and tells him that Benno wants the palace papers, and they are surprised why Benno wants the palace papers, and at this time Karakuri tells Benno that he trusts there is a lot of Assam, and he suggests that they go to him to find out Samir's address and open it. But when they talk to him, they discover that he is still tired after what happened to him in the palace, and he forgets a lot, and he says that he found strange pictures on his mobile phone, and he did not remember who. Her photos, and when the two of them look at the photos and discover that they are photos of Assam inside the palace, and he asks him to send them to him, but Karakuri looks at the photos carefully and notices that there is a photo of 4 young men in one of the photos, and he knows that one of the young men is his father who helped me and the other one is Chuman, the person who helped me. He met him from yesterday, so they decide to ask Abdin about his address, and they learn that he lives in the palace next to them, and they go to talk to him, and Chuman remains silent for a while. And then he says that the one in this picture is Samir, and that this palace is cursed, and that Samir, Bahar, and Esad were killed in this palace on the same day, so he wonders why his sons were not. Abdin tells them this, so Chuman shocks them and tells them that Abdin was killed along with the rest of the people on the same day, so they remember the two that Abdin did not eat, drink, sleep, or appear in front of them only, so they make sure that Chuman's words are true, and they are afraid to enter the palace and sleep in front of the wall for fear of Abdin's presence until daybreak, and they enter the palace, and Karakuri wants to leave the palace, but Beno tries to use Toman's words to solve the mystery of the palace, but they guess that Mohsen, the farm manager, and his wife, Fatia, are just swindlers, and they want to rob the family. That brought Fatia closer to Samir until I persuaded him to marry, and then convinced Samir to convince his father to give him the palace, but Bahir revealed everything and forced Samir to divorce Fatia, and after that he pushed Samir and Mohsen back, so Mohsen and Fatia decided to take revenge, so they killed everyone in the palace, so Karakuri was convinced of the story and the two decided to search for him. Fatia and Mohsen and hand them over to the police in the middle of the night. They wake up to the sound of a person laughing loudly and things break. They search while they are afraid for the source of the sound. At the same time, Karakuri receives a call from Alam's wife informing him that she will return to her home in the morning. So Karakuri gets scared that Alam knows that he has left the house, so he says he wants to go back to his house too, but Beno is afraid to sit in the palace alone, and he decides to go with Karakuri to his house, and they lie to Alam and say that he works in real estate. Karakuri helps him in looking for a buyer. So Karakuri asks Alam why he returned home, so she takes advantage of Banu's presence and tells him about her problems with Karakuri, and we know that Alam's family did not agree to their marriage because Karakuri is poor and she is from a well-to-do family, but Alam was determined to get married to the point that she was ashamed to bring her family home so that they would not know the right level. He saves the one who lives in it, So Beno takes advantage of the opportunity and says that he owns a palace and offers her that she and her family come to live with him despite Karakuri's rejection of the idea and his fear for his wife's family from the palace. But Alam agrees and says that her family will arrive tomorrow, and they decide to tell Alam's family that the palace belongs to Karakuri and so he can pino Karakuri, returning to the palace to search for Fatia and Mohsen. At the same time, Shireen goes with her husband, Rami, to the bank to complete the loan papers. But she learns that Rami had another loan with the guarantee of the villa, and that he wants to pay the loan amount from the profits of the hotel. Shireen feels that her husband is deceiving her. Rami is behind her and tries to deceive her and says all this for the sake of her and his 2 children, but Shireen refuses to believe him and tells him that he is the cause of their problems. During the quarrel, Rami learns that Beno inherited a large mansion, and it appears that greed takes it from him, and then Alam's family arrives in Cairo, and it consists of 3 members. Her father Shafiq, her mother and her little sister Farida and Biban are excited to see the palace in which their daughter is staying, and they all enter the palace except for Zizo, who is watching Esad, and she is consulting him from the balcony, and Zizo is consulting with her, and Alam is lying to her family, and she says that Beno is the owner of a Karakuri, and that he is staying with them for 2 days in the palace with them, and she watches her family at the palace, and they enter a room to rest from traveling, and Zizo walks in the palace, and when he sees the locked room, he opens the door on his own, and Zizo enters, and he sees the same lady who was in the balcony consulting him to sit with her, and then he notices Karakuri that Zizo has disappeared. He calls for him until he appears to him, and Zizo tells him that he was sitting with his grandmother in the room, and Karakuri is surprised because he asked him about dreams, so Zizo answers and tells him that I was sitting with the other grandmother, so Karakuri fears for Zizo a lot, and in the middle of the night they wake up to terrifying sounds and things break, so they fall asleep. They all search for the sound except for Farida, who remains asleep, so the people of Alam are surprised and want to know the source of the sound, or is Beno Karakuri knowing that this is the sound of ghosts? So Beno pretends to talk to the police and tells them that the neighbors are noisy and they cannot sleep. Then he says that the neighbors are annoying and they always make a loud sound, and after a while the sound silences and they go up to sleep. At that time, Farida wakes up to a person pulling the blanket over her. She thinks it is someone from her family, and when she sees them entering the room she gets scared, and Karakuri wakes up to Alam's voice, and this is the first time she deals with him in a nice way, and she tells him that breakfast is ready, waiting for them, and the rest of the family gathers to eat, and Karakuri thanks Alam for the food, so she tells him that she did nothing and that she woke up and found the palace workers who did that, so he gets scared of her husband, and then Alam comes out and her family for a picnic. So they decide to let Zizo play inside the palace garden, and the 2 go to a room, and she opens it to search for something new, and Karakuri stops to touch the light switch because it is broken, and after a lot of searching, he finds a picture of a man and his lady, so they conclude that it is Fatha, but Karakuri did not see the picture, and they quickly lie down outside because of Zizo's voice crying, and he tells them that he was playing on the swing, and a man wearing a robe came and dropped him from the swing, so they conclude that this person is a Bedouin, so they fear a lot, and after a while, Alam and her family return, and Karakuri notices that Zizo is holding paints and paints, so Karakuri asks him where these colors came from. He tells him that she gives it to him and plays with him at this moment, and Karakuri decides to go back to his house with his family, but Alam refuses and forces Karakuri to stay in the palace. Here, Beno is surprised that Rami came to visit him in the palace and offers him to participate and take a loan with the guarantee of the palace. Rami learns from Beno that his wife inherited £14 million with the hotel, so Rami gets angry, and in the middle of the night Beno wakes up to the sound of the swing as it moves, so he guesses that Zizo is the one playing the swing, but when he looks from the window of the room, and it becomes clear that the swing is moving by itself, and there is no one, and Beno goes to find out what is happening, but he is surprised by his child, and says that he saw her alone in the palace garden, and she was crying and searching for her family, and she had sympathetic dreams with her, unlike Karakuri and Beno, who were afraid of her to be a ghost, and the next morning everyone the family sits for breakfast and they try to talk to her to find out anything about her, but she refuses to talk to them, and Zizo speaks and says that she spoke to him and told him that her name is Rue, and after a while he knocks on the door, and she asks about Rue and says that she was asking about her from the residents of the area until they brought her to the palace, and she thanks them for taking care of the child. As soon as they leave, the electricity is disconnected from the palace, and Karakuri goes to fix the electricity. Why is he afraid of the palace? After returning, they discover that Farida has disappeared, and they keep looking for her until they find her in the palace garden. In front of Abdin's room, she says that someone held her hands until she reached this place, so she thought he was a Karakuri, and we deny Karakuri that he didn't. He wants to see Beno, and Zizzo and Saif keep playing together, and the three talk to each other, and Rhonda says that Kareem is hiding something from her, because Kareem gets angry every time he hears about the palace. What did the children see? As soon as they held the door, they saw murdered people, and at the stairs, they saw a hanged person hanging on the stairs, so Ali Karakuri tells what he saw, and we know that Shafiq was a sheikh in the mosque, and he knows about ghost stories, and Shafiq says that this palace has many ghosts, and that there is an evil ghost who has imprisoned the rest of the good spirits prevented them from leaving, and that all that happens to them are messages that the good spirits try to deliver to them to solve the mystery of the palace, and that these spirits will not stop until they solve the mystery of the palace, and the Alam family goes, and Karakuri decides to tell the truth about the palaces to Alam, but she does not believe him, and she thinks that he is saying that because he wants to leave her, and she is determined to sit in the palace, and he goes to check on his son, Saif, and the boy says, "Speak to Beno," and he becomes the boy. Kareem concludes that his son was in the palace, his mother, Rhonda, and he goes to quarrel with her, so Rhonda is surprised by his manner of speaking, and asks why is he afraid of the palace. Kareem goes to his brother Beno and tells him that this palace has a big secret, and that our uncle Samir went crazy and killed his mother and his son, and then he sneezed, and then he took my children, Kareem and Shireen, when they were young, and they moved to live in another place far from the palace, and he asked them not to tell anything about what happened. It happened to anyone, and Kareem continues the speech and says that he is the reason for preventing the lawyer from giving him the palace papers so that he does not know anything about the past. But since he knows many things, he decides to tell him the story of the palace and warns him to keep Rhonda and Saif away from the matter, despite what happened, but Beno feels that something is wrong, the story is wrong, and at night the windows of the house are slammed and the lights are turned off until they all go outside the palace, as if the palace wants to get them out. Beno looks at his picture of the one with Zizzo, and Beno discovers that it is a picture of Ashrak, the caretaker of the villa owned by Kareem BBEs. They wondered how Zizzo drew Ashrak when he had never seen him before, and they all go to Kareem and Banato Ali Ashrak until Kareem appears to him and they quarrel, but Beno refuses to move without speaking to Ashrak and keeps calling until Ashrak comes out of his room, and for the first time since they know me, Ashrak speaks and says he will any palace comes with them. So they are all shocked because they thought that he was dumb, and there he begins to tell the true story, and he says that his father used to work as a worker in a brilliant factory. When he asked his mother to marry Fatia, she refused, on the pretext that she was a worker in the palace, so he decided to marry secretly without knowing his family, until Abedan heard them and learned about the ease of their marriage. Samir agrees to the idea of divorce because he is forced, and after the divorce, they discover that Fatia is pregnant, and he decides not to tell Samir so that he will not be affected. Aiden kept helping me think about hiding the fetus until Abdin came up with an idea, which is to force Mohsen, the manager of the farm, to marry Fatia, so he is convinced of him. A lot of money is offered to Mohsen to agree to the husband, and they actually get married and convince people that this boy is the son of Fatia and Mohsen, and after that he leaves them to help me and travels to work outside the country. During this period, Samir gets very tired and refuses to eat, drink, leave the room and talk to the family, and because Bahar was feeling guilty, he decided to calm down. The palace went to Samir to make him happy, but Samir did not care and remained sad for Fatia, and because Abdin was a spy who helped me, so he told him about the issue that Samir would take the palace, so he gets angry and helps me and decides to go back to Egypt. And he takes him back to his room, despite Esad's grief for her son, but he can't help it. After his return, he helped me from traveling. He can convince his father to lock my brother in the storage room because he poses a danger to them. After that, Samir remains locked in the room and gets tired more and more. Abed Bin is responsible for the entry of food and water for him, so he deduces Beno and Karakiri that the sound of the screaming is the voice of Samir. He was trying to cry for help and continues Ashrak and says that Ani was doing everything to get back the palace, so he decides to go to Fatia and tell her that she comes to the palace with her son to see her brilliant and soften her heart. When Ani goes out, he meets Mohsen and lies to him and tells him that Fatia is coming to the palace to see Samir. Mohsen begins to doubt and watches Fatha and sees her as she is going to the palace without his knowledge. Fathia calls to the palace, trying to sympathize with Bahir, but he expels her. On her way out, she sees Mohsen, so she hides inside the palace, fearing that he will kill her. We see Mohsen and Bahir arguing, and Mohsen is convinced that his wife is cheating on him with Samir, and he wants revenge on Samir at that time. something, but by mistake he wraps the rope at the end of the ladder, and Mohsen falls, hanged, and dies, so Esad loses consciousness, and Betuder Bahar, and orders Abedan to bury his body, and Esad and Bahar go to the room, so Samir notices that the door to his room is open, so he goes out and wants to take revenge on his family because of what they did to him, so he takes a gun and goes to his parents' room unconsciously from Samir killing his mother, he cries in her side, and then Bahar grabs the gun and kills his son at the same time. Fatia is hiding in the room, so she leaves the child on the bed and goes to find out what happened. She watches Esad and Samir. And they were killed. You guess that Bahir is the one who did that, so you hit him on his head with the statue until he dies. Then you take the child and lie down. We know that this room was closed and he couldn't open it at the beginning. So he lies behind her, but he did not catch up with her, and we know that Fatia is a witness to Abdin and she told him about what happened. Abdin went to the palace to find out what happened, but Aouni stopped him and killed him, because he is the only one who knows Samir Fatia's secret, and therefore Aouni determined to kill him to bury the secret with him, and he would stand far away and watch what happened and lose consciousness, and he wakes up while he is in the hospital, so he fears that Aouni will kill him, so he decides to pretend that he is speechless, and for this reason he kept him to go to their house, and at the same time, Shireen discovers that her husband, Rami, has taken the two daughters and they traveled outside the country. Shireen breaks down. She fears for her daughters. She decides to turn to Karim, but he refuses to help her, and he argues that his son is sick, and he takes Beno to the hospital. They check on Saif and he talks with Karim and Rhonda about what happened, and he is shocked about his father because he was an evil person. How did he hate the palace and why he wanted to inherit it, but Karim does not care about leaving them. The next day, Gali, the hotel manager, comes to visit Beno, who is staying in Beno, and tells him that he was sitting with his father before his death. Aouni wanted to give the hotel to Beno, so Beno is surprised by his words and goes to the lawyer to ask him, so the lawyer confesses and says that Karim and Shireen forged the will and gave the real will to Beno, and discovers that his father left him the hotel and part of the millions, so he confronts his sisters, so Karim defends himself and says I the only one who worked more, and I deserve the money, and we know that Beno's father loved him more than his sisters, so Beno blames them for what they did to him, and he says he could love them, but he will not do that, and he is content with executing the real will, and after a while, Beno goes to Karakuri and gives him a new taxi key instead of the lost one, and dreams will be clean the house, so they enter the bedroom, and he hints that they are building a picture of a lady on the wall, and Karakuri says that it is a picture of his mother, and her name is Fatia, and it will be the same Fatia, who used to work inside the palace, and they go to the palace quickly and through a picture of Fatia and Samira, who is inside the palace, confirming that Fatia is aware of his father, Karakuri, and we understand that Karakuri is the son of Samir, Fatia, who took her son and disappeared at the time of the accident. Thus, Beno Karakuri remains cousins, and they conclude that this is the message that the palace wanted to deliver to them, and that Esad had not stopped Karakuri in order to deliver it to the palace. She used to go to him and not anyone else, and the two of them rejoiced that they were relatives. The next day, Karakuri went to the palace with his family to live in it after Beno gave him up because the palace belonged to Karakuri. They don't go to sleep. The little girl appears between the two rooms, and it appears that she has a new secret that has not yet been discovered in any way. It's the end.